executive session. Thank you for your patience. If everyone could stand, please, and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You know, in my head, I always hear the Boy Scouts, when they finish, they all go, two, and their hands go down. And one of these days, if I ever say two, will just be that reaction from that Boy Scout. All right. Lorraine, could you please call the roll?
Linda Avanzato. Here. John Biscardin.
Here.
Larry Cerisi. Cheryl Clarkin.
Here.
Robert Jones.
Here.
William Mudge.
Here.
Kimberly Page.
Here.
Julia Held.
Here.
Dana Larkin.
Here.
Thank you.
Lorraine, could you please call the calendars?
September 22nd to September 25th, NEASC visit at North Kingstown High School. Tuesday, October 8th, 8 a.m., Policy Subcommittee meeting, Central Administration Building. Tuesday, October 8th, also at 7 p.m., School Committee Work Session, North Kingstown High School. Monday, October 14th, Columbus Day, schools and offices closed. Tuesday, October 22nd, at 6 p.m., there's a school committee tour of Davisville Middle School and Quidnesset. And then there are proposed changes to your calendar to change the November school committee meetings to Tuesday, November 12th, which is actually the usual second Tuesday of the month. Thank you.
Thank you. It is, that shouldn't be any problem for anybody, but what I would say is you can let people know if that is going to be a problem for that November 12th date, just let Lorraine know.
I haven't heard from anyone yet on that.
Okay. All right. That brings us to presentations and recognitions. Dr. Ajay, do you have anything?
Well, I just would like to take a moment to recognize Stony Lane Elementary School. I sent something out on listserv today. Some of the best news an elementary school or any school can receive in the country is to be awarded a blue ribbon from the Secretary of Education, and that has happened with Stony Lane today. The official notice came through, and we are very proud of Principal Ferrario and his staff, faculty, parents, students who are doing that great work over there. You can receive this commendation for extraordinary improvements or just exemplary performance, and theirs was a category of exemplary performance. And not that their improvements as of late have been all that bad. Their science scores have gone up significantly on this last round. I'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But so that's a great thing. Principal Ferrario and a teacher from the school will be in attendance for the ceremony in Washington on November 18th and 19th. And according to my calendar, I would suggest that we look at December 10th as our school committee meeting that we would have at Stony Lane Elementary, get a tour of the school with Mr. Ferrario, and spend some time during that meeting to have an official ceremony with all the school committee present to honor this great achievement.
Okay. That sounds great. Great. We'll make sure that's on our calendar, too. I received two principals who let me know of outstanding students. The one was from Lynn Saronin, who told me that here at the high school, the Miranda Johnson student was named to the All-National Honor Choir. I think that's the first time we've had anybody named to that choir, so that is quite the honor. And so was Norma Kayaza also named to that? I'm not...
No, she was in the picture because she is her teacher.
Okay. All right. The other student acknowledgement that I received was from Ruth Ann Logan, and she said that they had 3 students who took upon themselves to organize a fundraiser to raise money for the families that were affected by the Boston Marathon. So they collected from a youth lacrosse game, and they raised 1,300 students. And this was a lacrosse game that consisted of players from North and South Kingstown Youth Lacrosse League. And normally they compete as rivals, but at this time they were mixed the teams up for the benefit of the victims of the tragedy. And the money came in late August. So that was the 3 students who organized that were Noah Iden, Robert Green, and Griffin O'Farrell. So, Maureen, I will forward those names on to you. Are there any other recognitions of students? I know all of our sports teams are doing fairly well. Our soccer team, men's or boys soccer team has just had one loss, and I believe that's all for the girls, too. Am I correct, Mr. Jones? They've had 4 wins and 1 loss.
Yes, that is correct.
And our football team has been doing well, so,
We made sure all the teams would do well for the NEASC visit.
okay. And I was going to say, I guess there was a volleyball game in here tonight. I'm not sure how that's going, but hopefully they're doing all right. Okay. That brings us to citizens' comments. Lorraine, do we
No
have
one
any-
signed up on the sheet.
Is there any citizens who are coming up to comment?
My name is Colleen Pickering. I'm a resident of the town, and I also work at Wickford Middle School. And my concern is the $10,000 that you're going to spend to take down the tennis court at Wickford Middle School, because I'm also the softball coach at Wickford Middle School. And we had the fence around the softball field at Wickford Middle School rust and fall apart, and they took it down. And they replaced the backstop and the part of the fence in front of the dugouts. But when they replaced the backstop, they didn't make it high enough, and we hit cars that drive up and down Phillip Street, and I'm concerned of a lawsuit against our town when we go through the windshield of a car and cause an accident. Because we have, with foul balls, we've dented the roof of a car, we rented the side door of a car, and the gentleman just said, I can suck that out, don't worry about it. A truck went by with lawnmowers on the back, we hit his lawnmower. So we have hit them. A lot of our balls land in Mr. Shillabar's yard across the street, and he brings them back to us. We used to have a tree that was behind there, and I called it the foul ball tree because the foul balls would hit that tree and then stay in the field, like fall back into Wickford Middle School's land. But in a storm a few years ago, the foul ball tree blew over, and so now we're hitting more and more cars. And I notified the athletic director a while ago, the principal, the superintendent, James Marcello, when he was athletic director, David Young, the grounds guy. I've notified people about this issue, and I'm concerned about causing a tragedy if it goes to the windshield of a car. And my response was, Evelyn had a quote on it several years, like 4 years ago, of getting that piece of fence that bends over and stuff like that. And then they're like, the issue, Colleen, it's always where we're going to get the money. It's not in the budget, this year to get it. And I've also asked to have them skin the field, too, and make it all dirt infield. And that field, I use it for softball. The gym classes also use it. Teachers take their class out and use that area, and there's kids around that area all the time. People don't hang out so much around the tennis court. I know it doesn't look good. I know that fence is rusty. But the other place is in use, and I'm concerned about the priorities of spending the money. You came up with $10,000 to take down the fence and remove the tennis court and put pretty grass in. But I'm concerned about the other area that we actually do use. And I don't want my taxes to go up more either, but if you have money, I'd prioritize it in a different way.
Thank you. Are there any other citizens' comments? Great. That brings us to superintendent's report.
Thank you. I just wanted to note that as of this afternoon, the embargo on science scores has been lifted. So the brief news, Dr. Humbert is going to give a more detailed presentation about this at our next school committee meeting, but North Kingstown did do well on these recent science tests. I think you may have seen the news coming out today that in the state, scores have gone down, but not in North Kingstown, fortunately. Scores at the elementary level were up a point, up 3 points at the middle level, and they were flat at the high school. But we had a big gain last year, I think you remember, at the high school. So the trend is still good, and like I said, statewide, the high schools have gone down, I think, more significantly than any other level, and we stayed the same. So, I consider those good. There's a long way to go, and we're working hard at it, but I see the news as generally more good than bad. And like I said, we'll go into a lot more detail on that in 2 weeks if anybody's interested in coming out to that meeting and learning more about that.
All right, thank you. All right, that brings us to routine items. The first item is the executive session items. Do I have a motion to seal the executive session minutes from tonight's meeting?
So moved.
Second.
If there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Lorraine, is there any disclosure of executive session votes?
There were no votes to disclose tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that brings us to the consent agenda. What items would people like to exempt? I'm going to guess that people want to exempt D2.
About D1?
D1, okay, Mr. Busgarden. Anything else? Mr.
Yes.
Mudge?
3 and 4, please, and also E.
D3 and 4?
Yep.
Okay. All right. You said E, all of E?
Yeah, I just got a couple comments on them, that's all, so
All right.
this is easier.
We need to exempt C2. Mrs. Avanzato.
I'd offer a motion for the non-exempted items on the consent agenda.
There aren't too many, but go ahead.
Okay, I'm making that motion.
Second?
Second, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries, I think, on the one item. Okay, two items. All right, so the first item is the executive session minutes of September 10th, 2013. Do I have a motion to approve the executive session minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All right. Okay, all those in favor say aye, and whoever needs to be exempted, then tell Lorraine. All those in favor say aye.
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 I abstained since I didn't attend.
Second that?
Okay, thank you. All right, so that brings us to D1, the Wickford document cameras. Mr. Busgarden.
I exempted it just to thank everybody involved for getting the information together and having it accurate this time. All the numbers add up, and it makes it much easier to approve.
You're going to offer a motion?
I'm making a move to approve D1.
And I second that.
I was going to second it too, but I had a quick comment too.
Go ahead, Mrs.
I
Avanzato
appreciate,
and Mr. Mudge.
I wanted to say thank you to Mr. Merkel for bringing that item forward, and also for including the PTO president's letter in the packet as well. And thank you to Phil for pulling that together, the item together. That's all.
Mr. Mudge.
Yes, I'm concerned about that item. In fact, for the next 4 items, I'm going to vote no on, even though I support a couple of them. My first general comment on the 4 items, which includes this, is at one point in time, we used to have on the agenda here the amount of money that we're approving. Apparently, we've got away from that process. Okay, and I am recommending we go back to the process of, just like the town council, we have an item on the agenda, the funding amount that we're approving should be on the agenda. Now, with respect to this activity fund account, I find after review, in fact, I gave a few things, documents to the Budget Committee Chairman this afternoon, and we are woefully inadequate regarding our compliance issues with student activity funds. We have no policy, period. We do not have a school committee policy. I will forward the Secretary of Policies of several other schools, and, not in several other schools, but several other states like Kansas, Florida, and in fact New York, which has a 50-page policy on activity funds, which range from, just about everything. We have a serious problem here, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, we know in the past years that we, as far as I'm concerned, not we, but people misappropriated funds from activity accounts, and as far as I'm concerned, they did. And yet, despite all that, we still don't have a school committee policy.
Mrs. Avanzato?
I would concur that we had serious problems in the activity account area, which is why we had an audit in that area. We do have regulations about how those funds are to be expended, and I know I discussed this with Mrs. King, and she has spoken to the principals about this, and they are following the regs, and she's also keeping an eye on this very closely, and things are now coming on this agenda before the school committee, which is what we need to have happen. We don't have the abuses going on that we have in the past. I just want to make it clear from comments that were made at the previous meeting by myself and others that we're just trying to figure out how the funding works and whether or not what's appropriate to have to come from student activity accounts or not was something that we were working through and really had nothing to do with any accusations of impropriety. I want to make that clear right now because that was not being said. There were some other concerns about how the decision-making process took place, whether the PTO had a voice, and those concerns have been answered. And I think that we have leadership that has a lot of integrity, and we are seeing that in how we're doing things now. It's definitely improved greatly. I want to give the school committee credit, too, because we're the ones that did the audit and got some of those things addressed, which needed to happen. So.
Yeah, Mr. Mudge, last meeting, as you remember, you accused the school committee of not having anything on there, and you were mailed the procedures of what we have.
The school committee does not.
You were mailed the procedures.
Excuse me.
And you, I have the floor right now, Mr. Mudge. And you asked for this to be relooked at. And at that time, the school committee said that you and Mr. Jones can look at this matter on the budget committee. And so you have the authority that if you would like to change or make recommendations to change, you were given the document that we use as a procedure for all expenditures for the accounts, and so it's just a matter of scheduling your meeting and starting to do that. And once you have your recommendations, you bring them back to the school committee, and you bring them back to the administration, as I said in my email, and then from there, you can decide what will be done. But to say that there is nothing in place is an error, because there are procedures.
Excuse me. Now, may I speak?
Yes.
I will say it categorically again. We do not have school committee policy, period. You may have whatever you want, but it wasn't generated by the school committee. There's a major problem with defining what an activity fund is, what a fiduciary fund is, what a proprietary fund is, what a permanent fund is, and who has authority to authorize the expenditure of these things. It's very, very, we don't, as a school committee, have a policy. And Mrs. Page, you wrote me and said, we don't need a policy. Well, that's just outrageous, because 2 years ago, even 4 years ago, I waived that policy, the Green Book, Linda, and you can see, because I agree with you 100%, when we, as superintendent, was misappropriating and misspending activity fund account monies in the tune of about $1,200 a year for hors d'oeuvres at the Christmas party. Okay?
It was more than two.
Okay?
It was $500,000, actually.
No. I'm just
In
saying.
total.
Well, yeah, but there are other activity funds accounts. For example, if you look at the activity funds in some of the states you look at, we should be accounting for all vending machine money.
Bill,
No policy on that.
I would say this, that I think this committee authorized you and Bob
Yeah.
as a budget committee to come back to us and see, if you feel this needs to be school committee policy, we can talk about that. I think it makes it,
Well, I hope
we
we
need
can
to
with
hear
that.
back from the administration on that, too, because it may tie their hands to the point where they're writing $25 checks for this, that, and the other thing. We need to hear back from them, too, because that's part of the problem with activity accounts and how they're expended.
Well-
Some of it is small amounts spent on small things, and then we have, which I think is by the way, a great use of those monies is what we're doing tonight with these cameras. But I agree with you, Bill. Look at it and come back to the committee, and we can then discuss whether it should be a policy of the school committee, what the problems are with that from administration, and hopefully we'll work towards something.
I certainly hope the budget committee does that, because, I sent emails to the school committee about 1.5 years ago and 3 years ago to bring it up, and to the audit committee, okay, to look at that. And of course, the audit committee was useless. They didn't look at anything regarding these things, okay? So I look forward to helping the budget committee put together a recommendation, and I certainly will work with them to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Mudge. Mr. Busgarden, do you have a motion to make?
I would like to call the question.
We don't have a motion on the
Oh,
floor.
I would move to approve, what was it, C, D, what motion, which one was that, Bill?
One?
D1?
Is there a motion on that?
No, I already moved it, I already made a motion.
Did we already move that? Okay,
think so,
I'm
and
sorry.
then
I'm sorry.
Cheryl and I
need to
seconded
write
it.
down
It's
and
a long
I
ago,
both
yeah.
seconded it.
So I would like to call the question.
Okay, all right, sorry about that.
We're getting to the
All
question
right, all those in favor of D1, say aye.
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 All those opposed,
No.
motion carries.
To the secretary, I'd ask her to record what the amount of money is that we are approving in the minutes of the
It
meeting.
is in your agenda.
I'm asking for my privilege as a school committee member to have the amount put in the minutes of the meeting.
Yes, it will be included.
Thank you.
All right, that brings us to the tennis courts. So we've already had one person comment in the podium. Dr. J, or Mrs. King, would either one of you like to say anything about the tennis courts?
Sure.
Looking for a yes or a no.
You know, this has been something that, I live around the corner from Wickford Middle School, and I've traveled by the tennis courts and the property for many years. And I've noticed that particularly since the addition of the new high school, and the new tennis courts that are at the high school, that the tennis courts at Wickford just haven't gotten the usage that they may have once gotten. Very seldom used, and over the years have deteriorated to the point where it is very rusty. It is falling over and kind of tilted on one side. It doesn't seem to be a safe place for our kids, and I believe it is a real eyesore, and I take things like that very seriously. I think it's probably one of the most public vantage points in town where people see a school property, because you're going right up and down Tower Hill Road right there. And I think it's a real mark of how we take care of our schools, and to have the members of our community and other communities riding by that and seeing how poorly that looks, not to mention the fact that it's clearly unsafe. And so we've done some work. We've even talked to the town about the possibility of having them do it. They are way too overloaded right now, and would, if they could get to it, would be several months down the road. I'd like to and not necessarily at a savings to our taxpayers. So I'd like to get this done now. I'd like to get it reseeded. If down the road in the future there are some plans for other uses for that particular area or other parts of the front lawn at Wickford Middle School, that would be great. But for now, I think it's just important. I don't see that coming back. I don't see it getting redone in any way. It probably costs even more to do that route. So I think the best route is to take this approval for relatively small money and to take care of this problem immediately. Thank you.
Great. I had a conversation with Mrs. Avanzato today, and one of the things that she said to me was that she wasn't sure she wanted to take this out of fund balance. So I'm sharing this with the rest of the committee here in open session. And so one of the things that I thought of, well, I can understand that, is if we want to throw this on into our capital improvement project, that may be something we want to do here tonight. What I would suggest to the committee is, whatever how this discussion goes here about this item, is that we give suggestions for what we want to see do, because I look at these tennis courts, and yes, they're an eyesore. I also look at them more or less as an attractive nuisance, which is a term that we use when we say that it's something that kids are going to think is fun to play with, and they are probably going to get hurt on it because it is falling down. So it's a matter of how do we want to deal with this in the future. So I saw Mr. Jones, and then Mrs. Avanzato, and Mrs. Clark, and then Mr. Mudge.
Thank you, Mrs. Page. I guess I remind the committee members who had an opportunity to go Sunday and listen to the NEASC discussion we had, that one of the questions that they asked was how do we prioritize resources? And so I guess my feeling here is that if we're going to consider this out of fund balance, or even the capital reserve fund, is we say, well, what is this competing against? We're going to, I think, later on tonight, talk about the parent priority survey, where things like school safety, extra academic help, technology seem to be the things that come out of from our community. You know, it may be a small amount of money, but it's 300 hours of a tutor. It's 30 iPads. It's who knows what in terms of advancing our school safety measures. So when I sort of rack and stack things and I say, yes, I agree it's an eyesore, there's a lot of beautification stuff that I wish we could do around all the schools. But if you say, right now, would I rather have 300 hours of extra tutoring if I'm going to spend out of fund balance? Would I rather have 30 iPads? Or would I rather wait and say, this is something that, while it'd be nice to get done, when maybe the town has more time next year, and the town actually was, I think, not by a lot, but was actually the cheapest source. It's something we talk about as a committee, that when we have an opportunity to collaborate with the town to share services or use their things, that we want to take advantage of. And when I think about that, if this should fall in the SIP plan, it should compete against all the other things that we have in this. We're not 100% funded for our capital reserve project. So, again, while it's a small amount of money, I would just remind the committee to say, you know, we piecemeal stuff, is let's rack and stack this in terms of where it fits in priorities. If we need to, have it either compete in the SIP plan or compete in the next year's budget funding for that, or, you know, get back with the town and say next spring or something, when maybe their schedules are not at so much, and maybe they can relook at their things and say, do they really need a supervisor to look at someone taking down a fence? And some of those things. And I guess I would address, if it's a safety issue, I was there today, I mean, let's put a lock on it. So it can't be much of a safety issue if we don't feel the need to lock it up during the day. So again, I support the concept of this. I agree with Dr. Auger's point about all we can do to you know, I've made this point, whether it's our web page, our virtual presence, our physical presence, those things do make a difference. But when I say, where does this fit in priority, I can't justify spending right now on this.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Avanzato?
Well, I'm just thinking about some of the things that Mr. Jones just said. I don't really see this as really beautification, per se. I do see it as we can't have structures rotting on properties, and I think it's taking care of infrastructure to remove it. On the other hand, I wouldn't mind seeing it in comparison with our other capital necessities. I am interested in hearing more, or actually having the administration put together something for us on a fence for the foul balls as well. You know, I would be interested in pursuing that. But I think maybe we could hear from Phil on the capital improvement. I'm not against doing this. I don't know how this fits into other capital expenditures. Obviously, it's being brought to us because the superintendent felt it is somewhat of a priority to have this off the property.
You know, I agree with Mr. Jones to a certain point. You know, I do believe, you know, we need to be looking at our priorities and such. I don't feel that the tennis court issue, however, is out of line with that. As he mentioned, the number 2 priority out of 16 choices on that parent survey is safety. And that tennis court did have a lock on it, and it was recently taken off. I'm not sure why, but I noticed for about a year previous to that it did have a lock. And it should be locked again, and I will make sure that it does until this gets done. If this were a matter, you know, Mr. Jones pointed out that it's relatively small money. I think that makes a difference here. This is not an issue that is going to prevent us from making a major technology purchase when we get to that point, for the roughly, what is it, $7,000 or $8,000 that we're going to need to get this done. You know, it's something that has needed to happen for quite a while, and I think that we are in a position that we can do it. We can do it in a timely manner to get the thing reseeded before the winter. And I would just feel it's a relatively small item in that regard, but one that I think means a lot to a lot of people.
Mrs. Avanzado, did you have anything else?
No, I would just like to look into what it might cost to get the foul ball fence also, though.
Mrs. Clarkin?
So I guess I echo the sentiments of Mr. Jones and Mrs. Avanzado. You know, I'm hesitant to continually take things out of the fund balance, even if they're relatively small, because all those relatively small items add up. And we never know what we're going to have next month or down the line. Certainly not opposed to this, but I look at this as like a capital improvement issue that the others spoke about, where maybe it has to be prioritized. If we're talking about, liability, whether it's an attractive nuisance or anything else, my feeling is that we may have more liability with foul balls flying around, hitting cars and such, that, I don't think that that's a relatively expensive item to get, a top of the fence added to cover up, to prevent that from happening. And, maybe that's more of a priority than this is. So I think we need to do our due diligence and explore, what something like that might cost, if that may take precedence over something like this. But it just seems that it falls under the capital, reserve, a capital improvement plan versus coming from fund balance.
All right, I have Mr. Mudge next, and then I'll just ask the committee if you want to make a motion to move this over to the capital improvement plan.
If I could make a
Yes, Mr.
comment. I mean, I feel that this would be an item that would be, the money would come out of fund balance transferred into the capital improvement fund. So it really is both at the same time. This is a capital expenditure, and that's my understanding about how the finance piece would work on this, that it is a capital improvement expenditure. And I'd be happy to make an amendment to it to add up to $1,500 to do an extension fence on the softball backstop as well. Like no more than another $1,500 or $2,000, if it would please the committee to get that taken care of here as well.
Mr. Mudge and then Mr. Busgarden.
I have several concerns. Dr. Shea, you mentioned this problem has been, I guess, recognized for well over a year. But what I would ask, why didn't we have this in our school budget?
It's one of those items that I felt we would do this way, that we would see what we had for a school budget. As you know, during budget season, we're looking at making all kinds of cuts. And it's not usually about add-ons. And so, I felt like I needed to see what we had for a fund balance coming out of this year. And usually, as I think you've seen over the last few years, that it's the summer and this time of year where you start to understand what you might have for a fund balance, like I did with the technology expenditure at the end of June. You start to see what you may have and use that as the place to go to for these kinds of expenditures. And this one is a relatively minor one compared to the technology expenditure, which was, in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So, I don't always necessarily feel comfortable putting something like that in there. I see that as, in fact, during budget season, I would see that as a very easy target. So I'm going to say, well, we need to make budget, so let's claim another $7,000. Boom, this will go. And then it never gets done. I see this as an opportunity where we have the vantage point of seeing a little more clearly what we've had as a fund balance and how easily it could be transferred to a capital line and taken care of this one problem for relatively small money.
Well, I certainly disagree with that. If I don't believe that, and that's one of the things that I've had for several years with the schools in the past, is I don't think we've ever turned anything down from a maintenance standpoint. okay? We have never gone back and say, take this maintenance item on, and we had this issue years ago when the superintendent, wouldn't put down the issues that he was funding, and to requirement that anything over $5,000 or $10,000 to be in the budget, and that we understand what we're not going to fund. We should be given choices during the budget process to fund this. We should have had a choice last March, okay, when this thing came up. Now, the other point that I have is I'm not sure that we have the authority to even basically demolish this. I think if you look at this as a capital asset, and this belongs to the town, I think just like we can't we can't demolish Davisville Elementary School, for example. We can't demolish that. If we don't have a use for that, then the town could get involved in that. Perhaps the town would pay to have this thing demolished. Perhaps they have a change of use with it. But I think we need to go through the town and ask the council what their pleasure is. Maybe the council would in fact restore this. I don't know. But from a technical standpoint, I'm sure that this is an asset that the town council should be aware of and approve. With respect to the bid process in here, it's my understanding that this was put out the bid last March and April,
No,
or wasn't?
no formal RFP issued in March or April of last year.
What do you mean by no formal?
It was not advertised in the paper. There were a couple of people that were called. We were trying to get an idea of the range back then. There was no formal RFP in March or April of last year.
So so we call local contractors just to get an estimate?
To get a general idea, and there was a very wide swing. So then we did go out to formal RFP in August and still ended up with a very wide swing as is presented in your package. There was no formal RFP issued in March or April of last year.
But did people submit bids for this?
They just submit general, this is a back of the envelope, so they would know they were not formal bids.
All right, so I
But
am kind of coming up. We are.
I'm not, excuse me, I'm not.
I'll let you have your
I'm
more
not-
time in a moment.
Could-
I'm asking the
finish.
committee, where do you want to go with this? We're having a nice discussion,
Excuse
but
me,
it's time
you
to
haven't let
kind
me
of-
finish my discussion,
And I'll let you finish
okay?
in a
You're
moment.
interrupting my discussion.
Yes, I am. I want to know where the committee wants to go, because we don't have any sort of a motion on the table, so that's why I'm asking you.
Well,
what do
I
you want to
think
do
the
with
committee
this?
should hear what I have to say before we decide where we want to go,
Well,
Madam Chairman.
we've listened to you for a little
Okay?
bit here, Mr.
Okay,
Mizell.
well, we have a
I'll
few
go
more
back to your
issues
final
to look
comments.
at, okay?
I'd like to,
Yes.
Mrs. King, can I, what are the, since we want to eliminate the eyesore, we want to eliminate the, what you call it, attractive nuisance, an opportunity for a kid to hurt himself at our expense, and we want to get rid of the chain link fence. And we also want to put a hood, a visor on the backstop to keep the foul balls from exiting the ball field.
That's a softball field, too.
That
Okay.
would
Just,
you have to go
you
out
know.
to bid. and that's-
Right, well,
yeah.
exactly. My question is, Mrs. King, if that were to be put out to bid, could you see, would it be, with the risk of muddying the waters even more, could you see if they would be able to utilize some of the existing chain link fence from around the tennis court to make that hood?
Good idea.
I certainly could. The issue that our employee brought up has never been brought to my attention, so I can't really make any promise of anything because I really don't entirely know what the whole issue is. I've never heard that issue before. But certainly, I mean, I can ask anybody anything you want me to ask them.
I mean,
That would actually probably have to be, we would have to rebid. I would suggest that we rebid if we are changing the scope of the project that much, just so that there are no future issues with anybody. So that would be my recommendation. If that's what we're going to do, we would rebid it, including that piece.
I think what the committee could do is, if you wanted that piece, that would be something that you should almost take separately and ask the administration to go out for a bid,
Mary, I would
rather
say
than tying them together.
If it's $2,000 or less, we don't want to put the administration through the extra work and expense of rebidding this. So-
2,500 or less, well, actually,
Additional project.
Yeah, 2,500 or less does not need to have a formal bid, or even, it doesn't have to have 3 quotes. Anything over 25,000,
2,500.
does need 2,500 does need formal quotes, and over 5,000, we would go formally to bid, and it would come to the school committee for approval.
And I would make a motion to approve this agenda item with the proviso that the administration look into obtaining the backstop piece or use of the other fence for the backstop piece, if that's scrap. Either way, that's my motion.
Am I going to
There
be
a
able
second
to,
on the motion?
I would second
am I
that.
going to be able to finish my comments, please?
Now we have a motion on the table, and so I would like your comments to be addressed towards the motion.
Well, I thank you very much for allowing my comments to be heard after you've gone through this, but I'll continue anyway. First of all, I do agree with Mr. Jones, because I think we ought to look at the town to do this job. First of all, it was said that the town couldn't do anything until this December, which is fine, we can lock it up. But I can't, and we can almost do the job for, I think, the savings, maybe $1,000 or something. And I look at this and I'm saying, the town quoted this thing to do the job on overtime with a supervisor or whatever. And I'm saying overtime, well, possibly they could squeeze the job in and not do it on overtime. Nonetheless, I don't have a problem with the town doing it on overtime, and I think it would be it's acceptable to me if we can save even $400 or $500, and at least the town employees can make a few overtime dollars for weekends. You know, it's a win-win for the community. The town can schedule this thing when they can do it, and they can do it in phases. For example, the town could come in and have somebody just tear the fence down, okay? That does away with the hazard, and then they could do the whatever work that they need, okay, to restore this in March or April when the weather changes. In addition to that, you know, I'm concerned about, you know, if you look at the bids, they're crazy, they're all over the place. Nonetheless, is that I think the town could probably do it as expensive, if not less, even if it's a break-even point. They have the opportunity to do that. They could also do the seeding, okay? And with that in mind, I'm saying, gee, we should go back to the town first and ask them for approval, because it is a capital asset, and we don't have the authority to demolish capital assets. Well, then we can go back and say, gee, give us a schedule on when you can get the fence down to get rid of the safety problem. And then if it takes 4 months to do it, then it takes 4 months. We haven't heard anything, okay? And then if we have the money, then fine. If not, maybe the town can do it less expensively, or we'll pick up the tab.
Bill, I think, at the risk of stretching this out painfully longer, I don't believe that's a capital asset. I think capital assets is restricted to buildings. Could be wrong.
Excuse me.
Let's hear from
If
Mrs.
you had
King.
looked in your package, I have worked with Phil Bergeron, the Director of the Department of Public Works, on this. He knew fully that we were analyzing this between an outside bid and between the school and town employees doing it. Mr. Bergeron and also Mr. Embry knew of this request to analyze it that way as well. No issue has been brought to my attention or Dr. Ajay's attention that we are breaking a law by taking down the Wickford Middle School tennis courts.
Well, it is a capital asset. Do we understand that, John? It is a capital asset. And does it hurt to ask the town council if we should get rid of this capital asset? That's all I'm saying. You don't have to believe me, but I believe you'll find that I've been in this business a while, that that's a capital asset.
Mr. Jones.
Thank you. I appreciate some of the discussion we've had here, and while I appreciate Mrs. Avanzano's sentiment, I again would caution, we just couple these two items. You know, we're writing checks that I would ask the six of us here to know, do you even know how much is in fund balance right now? Not that we can't write a $7,000 check, $8,000, of course we can. But, you know, we're 2+ months into this fiscal year. We haven't had a discussion with the administration on how fiscal year 13 ended and how fiscal year 14 is looking. And granted, again, $7,000, $8,000. We approved $25,000 for roof inspection. You know, as Mrs. Clarkin pointed out, you know, we might have items coming up. And again, $7,000 or $8,000, but that could be something else. And it's something else that we really don't have an appreciation of what it racks and stacks against. And I guess I would say is, it'd be nice to get these kind of unfunded requirements from all the principals in their things. And I'd really like to know, if we're going to spend $8,000 out of fund balance, what am I giving up that I'm not? Again, I think, can we put a lock on it and keep people out? Yes. Can the administration look at this separate issue if it's under 1,500 or whatever it is? Yes. Or could we even hit up the town softball league? We hit up the other sports organizations to chip in once in a while too for stuff. So, there's those other options. But, if it's not an emergency that someone's going to get hurt in the next month or two,
We don't know when.
well, if we lock it up, but I mean, I'm not talking about this on the tennis court, but, we keep writing these checks piecemeal, meeting after meeting after meeting. Let's have like a list of what we're racking and stacking things against in terms of these unfunded requirements. I don't think it hurts to just sort of take a step back and let's have a little bit of discussion on where we're at financially. What other things, Dr. Zay has sort of hinted at, it's a very changing dynamic. We haven't done the enrollment report. We haven't, fully fleshed out or heard back from the administration on how VOTEC is doing and some of these other things. Again, I don't think it would hurt to sort of just take a step back and say, this is something that can compete for funding, whether it's later on this year for the spring or in the normal budget cycle as we look at capital stuff.
All right,
Can we call the question?
Yeah, we have a motion on the table and a second. Lorraine, could you read through the motion again?
A motion to approve this with proviso that administration looks into the backstop piece or using fencing for the backstop piece.
All right, could we take a roll call?
Linda Avanzato.
Could you clarify that again? What are we doing here? John asked for something to be done, which sounds like a good idea, okay? But
Just read
you
the
can't
motion again.
demolish it and save it at the same time.
Mrs.
I read
Mrs.
it as
Berglund
Mrs.
can read
Avanzato
the-
stated
yeah, she
it.
can read the motion again, but
Please.
she can't explain the motion.
Well,
Can you read it
Please.
again?
Go ahead, read it
Please.
again.
I can read it.
Yeah.
To approve the item with proviso that administration looks into the backstop piece or using fencing for the backstop piece. Was that your motion?
That's my motion. I mean, obviously, the company that's going to be just tearing it down is going to have to be asked whether there's possible to save the fencing. Otherwise, my motion would also authorize administration to spend up to $2,500, which is the amount that was mentioned by Mrs. King, for the backstop piece, as well as funding the initial item that we're voting on.
Okay, let's go and have a roll call vote.
so could you clarify the amount of money we're talking
another
about
motion
here?
if you like.
That this would,
Yeah, why don't you do that?
I'll make it in two.
let's clarify what the costs we were approving, please.
I think it's just the cost you're approving is the cost that is right here in your agenda, because the other thing that...
What is that? 7603?
Right, because the other thing Mrs. Avanzato said was just to look into. So there is no cost being
I would
approved
like it
at
brought
this-
back to the committee.
Linda Avanzato.
Yes.
John Biscardin.
Yes.
Cheryl Clarkin.
Yes.
Robert Jones.
No.
William Mudge.
No.
Kimberly Page.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-2.
All right, that brings us to item number D3. Before we start having questions about that, Mr. Biscardin, I know that your facilities committee looked into this, and so I'd like you to be able to talk to this school committee about this snow removal.
Sure. And at times, Ms. King, I'll be asking you to help me out, all right? Because I don't... First, Ms. King decided to put out to bid an additional parking lot for clearing, to subcontract an additional lot to have the snow removed. It was not due, it was not put out because we were dissatisfied with the jobs our current vendors were supplying. It was to provide relief to our folks because of Mrs. King felt that she could better utilize the resources she had in other areas if she had another parking lot being cleared by a subcontractor. So she put out the bid. We had a total of 2 people respond. One, our existing vendor, and another. And when the facility subcommittee looked at the information, they were light years apart. The numbers were just very, very far apart. So we decided to bring them in to talk to them to find out, see if we could learn why the numbers were just they weren't very close at all. So we had them in, we discussed it with them, and they both explained their process, and we felt that in light of the fact that the second vendor came in substantially lower on the surface, when you looked at the entire package and looked at the methods in which they were describing they were going to handle the situation, we felt it was in our best interest to, in this case, go with the more expensive provider, which is our current provider. Snow removal is a very important part of the workings of the school, and I can let, I would like to have Mrs. King explain to us what I mean by that.
First of all, I will just clarify a little bit. The contract that we had with the incumbent did expire on June 30th of 2013. And at that time, this group had the North Kingstown High School and Davisville Middle School as the 2 schools that they were taking care of. When we went to bid, we did ask that the bidders bid separately on all of the schools. And the reason why we did that is because we did want to take a look at adding another school to this contractor. And as Mr. Biscardin had indicated, it really was to use the precious resources that we do have with our facilities group a little bit better. You know, we have many times where our group, you know, says, I need 1 more hour, I need 1 more hour. And while I certainly can't predict the weather, we do hope that this would help that group if we choose to outsource that additional school. It will help our group be able to focus their energies on the other schools. That's the first thing. The second thing is that both bidders were, you know, had a lot of information. The incumbent had a lot of really good experience with us. They've been with us for nearly 9 years as the contracts have been awarded. The owner of the company came in, and the person who actually is in charge of the plowing for these schools was also in. They know where drainage areas are. They know how high sewer covers are. It was really actually very impressive, the amount of information that they had about the school. And as Mr. Biscardin indicated, you know, Dr. Auger and I and our facilities supervisor, you know, we're up at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning when we have these snow events. The last thing that we need to worry about is whether or not we have a vendor that can actually do what they say they can do. And the facilities subcommittee was kind enough to review this with us. I was very confident with our facilities supervisor and what his recommendation was, but actually someone who's on our facilities subcommittee actually used to have the contract for the high school before he was in charge of the committee. So they're really well versed in this as well, and I thought it was important to get their input, and they felt comfortable with recommending to the school committee that we keep the incumbent for all of the reasons that were listed in the letter. Their past experience, they pre-treat areas before storms and during storms, which the other bidder did not. Their sanding rates were much lower than the other bidder, which I think is a key point because, again, I can't predict the weather, but in most instances what we're doing is we're sanding and we're pre-treating. We're not, you know, knock on wood, getting rid of 8, 10, 12 or more inches of snow. They had more than adequate equipment. They actually have people on their staff. They're not just a bunch of subcontractors, which is of concern as well, because sometimes subcontractors might say, well, yeah, I'll help you out, but they could be engaged otherwise when we need them. And they provided all the other information that made us comfortable with recommending the incumbent, as well as adding this Quinnesset Elementary School to the 2 schools that they currently plow.
I'd like to make a motion to approve D3.
I'd like to second.
Okay, I'm going to give Mr. Mudge first preference in talking, since he was the one who exempted this. Mr. Mudge.
So we're having basically a shortage of manpower that really precipitates the additional parking lot to be added. A few years ago, I'd like to mention that we talked about consolidating the plowing with the town, their plowing services. Have we looked at that again at all, under their contract?
Actually, the
Under
town...
a single contract?
No. Actually, I'm sorry, Mr. Mudge, we did discuss that with them, if they wanted to go out to bid with us at the same time. But they really don't. They only contract in certain pieces. They don't have, they'll do an on-call kind of thing, is my understanding. So as opposed to where we know we have this school, and this school, we want specifically done all the time. The town does more of, well, they're calling some subcontractors if they're short a guy or if they start getting behind.
They don't have contracts like this?
No,
Okay.
they really don't. They have a contract on who they know the subs are they can go to, but it's not a guarantee kind of thing. Where they know that every single time there's a storm, we want you to come to Davisville Middle School or to the town hall. They don't operate the same way.
If I might add, Mr. Mudge, that when we were discussing that, when I was at the last meeting and that subject came up, Mr. Bergeron was lamenting the fact that he doesn't get many responses for people wanting to be subcontractors either. So there's not as many people out there that push snow that I thought, and I think that he thought too. I think he was rather surprised when he was telling me that there's just not as many people there willing to do that, to do big jobs.
I was just wondering about the consolidation aspect, because that was discussed several years ago as well. My other question is, what do we have budgeted for snow plowing while we're here in the count,
We have a snow budget of,
roughly?
it's about $40,000 because we'd be looking at overtime, and that's based on past history.
I just wondered, because I didn't recall.
Yeah,
catching
our
it.
facility supervisor calls it his snow budget.
Okay, roughly 40K. Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Avanzato.
I wanted to thank the Facilities Subcommittee and Mrs. King, because I think they look at these issues pretty closely, and it's very valuable for us, because, of course, we would be reluctant to normally choose a high bidder, but there's very good reason to at times. I just want to point out a couple of quick things. It was my understanding that once the sanding rates were figured into the entire equation, that the 2 bids were closer than originally thought. I want to say that. And I also wanted to say that the Facilities Subcommittee was impressed by both of the bidders, actually. The other bidder, the one that's not on our agenda tonight, is probably going to may in fact be doing some work for the town, because they had a lot to offer as well. But I think it's critical when you're dealing with schools that the pre-treating and also the clearing the snow during the event, we can't wait until after the snow event, not at a school, because sometimes we'll be opening during a snow event, hopefully lots of times if it's just a small amount of snow. One quick other point, with respect to consolidation with the town on this matter, I remember we talked about this last winter, or maybe it was 2 or 3, or who knows, I've been here too long, I think. It was a while ago, I don't remember exactly when. But the town had said to us that we would be second if we went in with them. They would plow us after they did all the town buildings. We can't do that. We're schools. We've got to open at the crack of dawn and get the kids in for the school day. So that made it a little bit less attractive for us to move forward on. So that would be my last comment. Thank you.
All right.
I would like to comment just on that, just because
We have a motion on the floor.
I would like to just comment on that. I think what the town said, you're absolutely right, but what I was thinking of is what we would be doing is we would be on their contract. It would be a fixed contract we'd have with them. So the people that we would have would be dedicated to us. They couldn't do that. And so that really shouldn't have been an issue. But anyway, it's worth considering or looking into.
All right, so we have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor of D3, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. All right, that brings us to D4. Do I have a motion to pass D4?
Motion to approve?
Yes, to approve.
Second?
All right, Mr. Mudge, you wanted to talk about D4.
Yes, not really, but I just wanted to put in my objection that we don't have the amount listed on here that we've authorized for these purchases, and I think it should be. And I didn't, again, was this a line item budget this year?
Yes, it's upgrading the lease that we have now. We have budgeted for the lease that we have now.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah,
Didn't
it's
catch
not
that.
new. It's just replacing a very old piece of equipment that we're going to have to replace in a year or two anyway.
So we had that funded anyway? Mm-hmm. Okay, and what was, I would ask the secretary to put the cost of the approval in the minutes of the meeting, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have any objection to this item per se. I would just like to sort of ask the question or put out the statement, since it's talking about postage, is I know I, for one, get a monthly mailing, and I know it's only 46 cents, but is there a way that some of these mailings or some things, documents, can be just accessed online, or is that just because I haven't opted to do that? I mean, I know it just seems like we get a lot of mailings in terms of just in general. I don't know if we've sort of looked at how technology maybe can reduce some of the need for postage items. Not looking for a specific answer now, just throwing that point out there, whether we can maybe take a look at some of that stuff and reduce just the need for postage in general.
I don't know all the details on the mailings that you've been receiving. I mean, my own personal history with this is that, you know, as a principal or assistant principal in another district and as an administrator here, we always look for, if this is something we can do with an email, we're going to do it with an email. And there are some very important documents, for instance, report cards. You can't always be absolutely sure the family is going to have a computer to receive an electronic report card, so you have to send one anyway. And so I think there's always a discussion, can we get away with doing it just electronically? And so I think, I share your concern that we should try to get as much done electronically as we can. And I think in most cases we're doing that. I can't think of any area where they haven't at least asked that question.
I'm just wondering if, we can look at by the start of next school year between the Blackboard portal and Aspen, maybe not having to fill out a blue form and triplicate. That seems to be redundant information on some, I know some things. I know, like, for example, this student handbook, that was great. I know that was online, and you can ask for it if you don't. And I agree with you. I know there's some things you just want to verify there's things, but, again, maybe it's just something we can look at, over the course of the year if there's opportunities for, and maybe in the HR area, too, is what I'm talking about as well. Thank you.
All right, we have a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor of approving D4, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
You.
Motion carries. Okay, that brings us to E. Do I have a motion to approve items under E?
So moved?
Okay, Mr. Mudge, you wanted to discuss something?
Basically, my comment is that I would like to know what the amount of money we are spending on each of these items. Approval of after-school, facilitators in the account. Is that a government account? Is that a private account? Again, we were doing that before. The advisors, I don't really care about, but that's my general comment. And I see where we have an appointment of an academic resource coordinator. I'm not sure that's budgeted or it's in the account. Don't know what that's costing us. Any certified accountants, and also approval of appointment of school psychologist interns, what that funding is and who's paying for it and so forth. So that's my general comment on all the items.
Okay, well, all that information is in your packet.
Yeah, I understand, but I think Dr. we had agreed, especially when school committee member who's now on the town council, Mr. Welch, we had agreed to put those costs on the document so that we, and the public, sees the exact numbers that we are approving. And that was something that we had implemented. And I will not vote on any item further unless the figure is on the worksheet, on the calendar.
Duly noted. Is there any other item for discussion? All those in favor of E, say aye.
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 All those opposed?
No?
Motion carries. All right, that brings us to A, the DMS Quinessa Tour. Mrs. King, do you want to say something about that?
No, just that I do have set up with Jim Partridge, who is our architect, and Phil Bergeron for October 22nd at 6 p.m. I'd just like to know wherever you want to start. If you want to start at Davisville or Quinessa, it doesn't matter to either one of them. Or if we start here and go over whatever the process is going to be for that, but they're all set for that time frame, and we look forward to the tour.
What was the date on that again, please?
October 22nd, 6 p.m.
Do you want to know from us if we want to, which school we want to start
Yep,
at? or-
wherever you guys want to start, yep.
All right, so school committee, do you want to start at DMS? Or do you want to start at Quig?
What's closer?
Depends on where you live.
Correct.
They're both far away
Therein
from
lies
me.
the rub.
How about DMS?
All right,
Okay, we're starting at DMS, okay.
all right, great. All right, so that brings us to new business. Dr. Ajay, the parent survey results.
Yes, I am pleased to report that we had 753 responses to our parent survey, parent priority survey. The survey asked about 16 particular budgetary areas, what parents would prioritize, how they would prioritize each area as a focus of future investment, should we have the funding to address some issues, and we asked parents for comments on the item that they prioritize as their highest priority for future spending. District-wide, of the 16, the highest areas that were listed by parents were technology for student learning, school safety, advanced coursework options for students, extra academic help for students, and class sizes. So that will be posted to the community on all the same listservs that we advertised as tomorrow, the district results packet. You also have these results filtered out for high school, middle school, and elementary as well. And those levels, the results were fairly consistent. I don't know if those same items were the top 5, but they were all some of the top vote getters in each of the 3 areas. So,
Phil, I thought it was very helpful to break them down by high school, middle school, and elementary school. Can you attach those reports to the listserv?
I can. I hope it doesn't
I don't know if it's
lock
gonna
up
blow up
people's
the
emails
unit.
or something by having all those attachments. I don't think it's that heavy an attachment, so I probably can. I'll try to do it that way.
Might be easier for people to read depending on what
Right.
school that they were focused
Mhm.
on.
Other comments, Mr.
Yeah,
Jones?
yeah, I thank the administration for doing this. I know with these kind of surveys, the open-ended questions are always a challenge to summarize. I'm just wondering if at some point someone can go through and not necessarily put this, but just see if there's anything that pops out in terms of it. Yeah, no, I'm looking.
I would nominate Mr. Jones to do that filtering work.
I have some student interns who have gotten good at open-ended question stuff, but just in terms of whether more or less like an interesting suggestion or recommendation was made, by someone in the community who maybe has a good idea and stuff. So, and I'm hoping now that we have a little more focus, at some point we can keep refining based on that to even narrow down some more specifics within those high priority areas. So thanks the administration for getting that going in a timely manner.
Any other comments? All right. So that brings us to the end of our agenda. So I have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I would second that.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries.
Simple.